the millionaire and the little waitress. Marcus Wellington had built an empire worth $300 million by the age of 42. But tonight, stranded on a desolate highway with a dead phone battery and an overheated Bentley, he felt more powerless than he had in decades. The storm had come out of nowhere, turning the interstate into a river of rain and forcing him to take shelter at the only beacon of light for miles, a ramshackle roadside café that looked like it hadn't seen a renovation since the 1970s. The neon sign flickered weakly, half the letters dead, spelling out Mais Café in stuttering pink light. Marcus hesitated at the door, his Italian leather shoes already soaked, his $1,000 suit clinging uncomfortably to his frame. This wasn't exactly the Four Seasons, but as another crack of thunder split the night, he pushed through the door, causing a rusty bell to announce his arrival with a tired chime. The interior was exactly what he expected. Worn vinyl booths, a checkered linoleum floor that had seen better decades, and the lingering smell of grease and coffee that had soaked into every surface. But what he didn't expect was the complete absence of any adult staff. Instead, standing behind the counter with a notepad clutched in her small hands, was a girl who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. She had dark curls that framed a face too serious for her age. And when she looked up at him, her brown eyes held a weariness that made Marcus's chest tighten unexpectedly. She was wearing an apron that was clearly too big for her. The strings wrapped around her tiny waist twice, and there was a smudge of something, maybe ketchup, on her cheek. "Welcome to Mary's Cafe," she said in a voice that tried to sound professional, but cracked slightly with nervousness. "Table for one?" Marcus stood dripping in the doorway, completely thrown off balance. In his world of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, he was always in control, always prepared for any scenario. But this he hadn't planned for. Yes, he managed, following her small figure as she led him to a booth by the window where rain streaked down the glass like tears. "I'm sorry about the wait," she said, placing a laminated menu in front of him with the solemnity of someone far older. "It's just me tonight. My grandmother had to go to the hospital, and there wasn't anyone else." Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. "What's your name?" "Sophie," she replied, then quickly added, "Sophie Martinez. I'm working tonight." He watched her trying so hard to be grown up, to fill shoes that were clearly too big for her in every possible way, and something in his carefully constructed walls began to crack. "Well, Sophie Martinez," he said gently, "I'm Marcus, and I think you're doing an excellent job." For the first time, her serious expression softened, and he caught a glimpse of the child she was trying so hard not to be. Over the next hour, as Sophie served him coffee that was surprisingly good and a grilled cheese sandwich that reminded him of his own childhood, Marcus learned her story. Her parents had died in a car accident 2 years ago. She lived with her grandmother, Mary, who owned the cafe but was getting sicker and weaker. Social services had been sniffing around, asking questions, and Sophie was terrified of being taken away and put in foster care. "Grandma Mary says the cafe has been in our family for 40 years, Sophie explained as she refilled his coffee cup with hands that shook slightly from the weight of the pot. "But we're behind on everything. Rent, utilities, repairs. The roof leaks when it rains hard like tonight." As if to prove her point, a drop of water landed squarely on their table from a stain on the ceiling above. Marcus looked around the cafe with new eyes. The worn surfaces weren't just old. They told the story of decades of hard work, of a family trying to make an honest living. The mismatched chairs weren't shabby. They were evidence of making do, of stretching every dollar as far as it would go. "The man who owns the building came by last week," Sophie continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "He said if we can't pay the back rent by next month, we have to leave." Grandma Mary cried that night. I heard her through the wall. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. A genuine desire to help that had nothing to do with tax write-offs or public relations. This wasn't about building his brand or networking opportunities. This was about a little girl who was trying to hold her entire world together, with hands that were still small enough to need help reaching the top shelf. "Sophie," he said carefully, "what if I told you that problems like this, money problems, sometimes they can be solved?" She looked at him with those two wise eyes. "Mister, you seem nice, but unless you've got $20,000 in your pocket, I don't think you can help us." $20,000. Marcus spent more than that on a single business lunch. It was less than he paid for his watch, less than what his car cost for a month of insurance. To him, it was pocket change. To Sophie and her grandmother, it was everything. But he also knew that simply writing a check wouldn't solve the deeper problems. This cafe needed more than a one-time bailout. It needed to be sustainable, to be able to support Mary and Sophie for years to come. What if we could do better than that, he asked. What if we could make sure the cafe not only survives but thrives? That night, Marcus made calls from the cafe's old rotary, rundown roadside cafe. But his mind was working at full capacity, formulating a plan that would change everything for the Martinez family. By morning, when Mary returned from the hospital, weak but stable, Marcus had laid the groundwork for something extraordinary. He didn't just pay off their debts. He bought the building that housed the cafe and 3 others on the same street, turning Mary into a property owner instead of a tenant at risk of eviction. He arranged for renovations that would preserve the cafe's character while making it more efficient and appealing to travelers. But the real magic was in the details. Marcus understood business, and he knew that the cafe's location was actually prime real estate. It was on a route that thousands of travelers took every day. With the right marketing, the right improvements, Mary's Cafe could become a destination instead of just a last resort. He arranged for the cafe to be featured in travel guides and food blogs. He helped Mary expand the menu to include local specialties and comfort foods that would draw people off the highway. He even arranged for a small gift shop area where Mary could sell local crafts and products, creating additional revenue streams. Most importantly, he set up a trust fund for Sophie's education and future, ensuring that she would never have to worry about money the way she had been forced to at such a young age. But he did it all quietly, without fanfare, letting Mary and Sophie believe that the success was their own. 6 months later, Marcus returned to Mary's Cafe, though it was barely recognizable. The building had been restored to its original charm, but with modern efficiency. The parking lot was full of cars, and through the windows, he could see families enjoying meals at tables that were no longer mismatched, but carefully chosen to maintain the cafe's homey feel. Sophie, now 11, greeted him at the door with a smile that lit up her entire face. She was still wearing an apron, but this one fit properly, and there was a lightness in her step that hadn't been there before. "Marcus," she called out, no longer the serious little girl trying to be an adult. "Grandma Mary, look who's here." Mary emerged from the kitchen, moving with more energy than he'd seen in their previous meeting. Her face was fuller, her eyes brighter, and when she saw him, tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, taking his hands in hers. "You didn't just save our cafe, you saved our family." Marcus looked around at the bustling restaurant, at Sophie laughing with other children whose families had stopped for lunch, at Mary directing her small but efficient staff with the confidence of someone who was no longer worried about losing everything. "You saved yourselves," he said honestly. "I just helped level the playing field." That evening, as Marcus prepared to leave, Sophie approached him with something in her hands, a small handmade card decorated with crayon drawings of the cafe. "I made this for you," she said. Grandma Mary helped me with the words. Inside, in careful cursive writing, it read, "Thank you for seeing us when we felt invisible. Thank you for believing in us when we almost stopped believing in ourselves. You didn't just change our circumstances, you taught us that kindness exists in the world and that sometimes angels wear business suits." Marcus had received countless awards, had his name on buildings, had been featured on magazine covers. But this card, made by the small hands of a child whose world he had helped save, meant more to him than all of those accolades combined. As he drove away that night, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that stormy evening 6 months ago. He was still a successful businessman, still wealthy beyond most people's dreams. But now his success felt different. It felt purposeful in a way it never had before. He had learned something that all his business education had never taught him. That true wealth isn't measured in the money you accumulate, but in the lives you touch and the differences you make. Sophie and Mary had given him far more than he had given them. They had reminded him of his own humanity, of the power of compassion, and of the profound impact that one person can have on another's life. The cafe continued to thrive, becoming a beloved stop for travelers and locals alike. Sophie grew up strong and confident, eventually earning a scholarship to college, though she already had her education secured through Marcus's trust fund. She studied business and hospitality, planning to expand the family cafe into a small chain of similar establishments that would provide the same warmth and comfort to travelers across the country. And Marcus? He discovered that his greatest returns didn't come from his investment portfolios, but from the relationships he built and the lives he touched. He started a foundation focused on helping small family businesses in crisis, always working behind the scenes, always letting the families believe in their own strength and resilience. Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen in the most unexpected places. A chance encounter during a storm, a little girl trying to be brave in impossible circumstances, and a successful man who remembered what it meant to care about something bigger than himself. These were the ingredients that changed two lives forever. The next time you're driving past a small, seemingly insignificant business, remember Sophie and Mary's cafe. Remember that behind every door is a story, behind every face is a dream, and sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply stop, pay attention, and care enough to make a difference. Because in the end, we're all just people trying to make our way in the world, hoping that someone will see us, believe in us, and remind us that we matter. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we get the chance to be that someone for another person. Did this story touch your heart? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced unexpected kindness from a stranger, or been in a position to help someone in need? Your stories matter and inspire others. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more heartwarming tales like this, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message today, and subscribe to Trillionaire in Love for more inspiring content that celebrates the power of human connection and compassion. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss a story that might just change your perspective on life.